What's up, everybody? It's your boy, Z Money. We are back for the 21, 45, 46. I don't know. I get the year wrong every time. Zachetology. The first round of the playoffs are upon us in not long. And we got NFL Sundays back. I don't think we had football last time I did Zachetology. That's sick. So let's talk about the RBSL and these matchups and what is going to go down. All right, let's talk about the league as a whole for this season. This was the worst season of the RBSL since I joined, 50 seasons ago, roughly? And it's really not even close. I mean, the league just feels dead. I said it in the chat, but while we might get some fun upsets of inconsequence, really these playoffs are going to come down to 4 matchups because there's really maybe 5 total teams that could even have a semblance of a chance. And I would really argue there's only 3 teams that could win the finals. 2.5, if you will. I'd give the Sonics maybe a half of a chance, but it's really going to be the Jazz or Nets. So that's what sucks. It also sucks just because, I don't know. When there's only 5 teams trying in a real manner, it dilutes the fun of the playoffs. The lottery becomes a giant mess. So when the lottery becomes a giant mess, and what I mean by that is just everybody's tanking, then trading draft picks just evaporates and totally dies, which is something we've totally seen. I think of the top 14 lotto picks, 12 were held by the original team, and the only 2 that got traded were the worst 2. So it's no one's moving their picks. Nothing exciting is happening. Yeah, I mean, it's not a hot take to say the league is dead. The good news is we have new people, John and Kiernan. Sorry if I messed your name up. Obviously, they're taking shit franchises that will take a long time to rebuild, but hopefully it's the sign of better things to come. I don't know. But if you're playing the goddamn RBSL and you're a team that's not a ghost ship, get your shit together and play. All of you fucking losers like Noel and Jack who are just fucking tanking, go play the fucking game and go make the playoffs and try. It's disrespectful and pathetic, and you suck. All right. So now that I've done my rant about how the league is dying, and hopefully we find some new GMs, but even if we don't, when you look back and you think about the fact that we have, in theory, 27 or 28 teams taken, but it really feels like only 10 of them are actually GM'd, that's my big problem. I'm less concerned about finding 2 new GMs to take the Warriors or whatever the untaken teams are, and more concerned about increasing the activity level of the 10 people who are on the fritz. It's okay if we have Ed and Marco that are never going to do anything, but I think we need to get more players above the Jason line. I think Jason is if you can't outperform Jason, then you probably need to figure out what the hell is going on. Jason's low activity, but his team feels alive. And there are a lot of teams that feel below the Jason line. Get above the Jason line. Jason, you're okay. I don't mean that as a slight against you. I mean that as you found the nice balance of both being actively inactive. All right. So for the season, I mean, we have 3 70-win teams. I don't remember the last time we had 2 70-win teams in a conference. I do, in my head, recall that happening. So, that's kind of the cool fun fact. But yeah, there's the Jazz, the Sonics, the Nuggets, the Pacers, and the Nets. And the playoffs is kind of how those, what will matter is how those 5 teams' destinies shake out. If you're not one of the teams I mentioned, thank you for playing. We'll see you next year. We will talk about your teams briefly, but it's more just a fun to see how far you make it. You are not looking to win a championship. So we'll start from the bottom like always because the East is the least. The East is so bad this year. Okay, so net rating, I believe it's 8 of the bottom 9 or 7 of the bottom 8 teams are from the East. So when we evaluate, like I said, these 370-win teams, if you look at net rating, if you look at Ampy, all these things would say the Nets are number 1. But I honestly think 5 points of margin or 5 points of net rating can be attributed to the patheticness that is the East. So I actually think the Jazz are probably better than the Nets. I think the Sonics are probably better than the Pacers. The Pacers and the Nuggets, I think, are a dead even match. That would be a super interesting one. Kyle says they're a bad matchup. I haven't thought about it because they aren't going to play each other unless we get some really wild final shit. So just my thoughts about how all those teams shake up. We'll talk more as we get deeper into Zachetologies. All right. I keep saying I'm going to go to the matchups and then getting distracted. I'm actually going to talk about the matchups now. Start with the least East, the bottom, the number 1 seeded Nets versus the 8 seeded Raptors. All right, there's not a lot to talk about here. I'll give my quick spiel on my vibe of the Nets. I won't even talk about the Raptors because A, they're ghost shipped, and B, they're terrible. I do not like this Nets squad. Of the past 3 or 4 Nets squads that have been going to the finals with Olin, the only thing I like about this team is that Olin is at his absolute peak. I think this is 30-year-old Olin, 29-year-old Olin. So, like, literally, this is the peak. We'll see how Olin ages. I suspect it won't be great, but he's also just so highly rated that, like, he'll remain. Maybe, there are some interesting up-and-coming players. There's Rycourt, who literally might be MVP next season. And then there's kind of the ultimate, it might be a boat player in Michael Lewis. I really don't see... and then Evan has that center who, if he were to plus, I think could also be interesting. I kind of see those guys as the 3 players who have a chance at replacing Olin, with Rycourt being the most likely and Lewis having the most potential to just straight up do it, although he's just like, who knows? He's got a long way to go. But for the Nets, Olin is amazing. The rest of this team feels like it was built to pub stomp and actually not win in the playoffs. And so they pub stomped quite well with one of the greatest net ratings ever, one of the best records ever, every stat best ever. But players like Omer Rosenberg and Benedict Mathurin, like, these strike me as players who will not be great in the playoffs. Omer Rosenberg, small, just like, how will he do against, like, I don't know what the East looks like in terms of centers. I don't think it's quite as bad, but no matter who comes out of the West, a fucking amazing center is coming out of the West, whether it's going to be the Seth Charles, Wilt, Jason Treble, Wombo combo of the Sonics, or the freaking Bastian Rycourt from the Jazz, or Lester McQuaid from the Nuggets. Like, a top 5 center is coming out, and Omer is, like, going to have to play big minutes in a forward slot. Scary. I know he has Ted Guillen, who's better, but Omer Rosenberg is, like, a key piece of this offense, and he's just going to get shut the fuck down by any good center. And then Benedict Mathurin is just, like, he's just meme bench points and plays no defense. And, like, his meme scoring ability is only mid at best. He's, like, a flat 60% guy, true shooting guy. So I worry for those guys. The rest of the team, Ted Guillen, clearly age has caught up with him. He's regressed greatly. So as a whole, this team is amazing. It's almost certainly going to the finals because of Olin. But I do think that the Nets are probably going to lose in the finals. So that's my current vibe on the Nets. We'll see how the playoffs pan out. All right, we got our first real matchup of round 1, the Knicks versus the Hawks. Knicks came out to a screaming start to the season and kind of rode the coattails of that as they faded pretty fucking hard as the season ended. But they did get the 4 seed over the kind of like Hawks, Wizards, Heat, Southeast like trio. The Knicks suck. I don't get why the Knicks did as good as they did, other than that the East is awful. I hate every player on this team almost categorically. Renee Snyder fell off a cliff. He looked like shit. Like, is the real answer that this team is living off of is like fucking Gavin Gant and Stuart Logier? Sorry, not Gavin Gant. It's Stuart Logier, who he signed for like $2.5 million and like can't score efficiently and is a mid defender. Like, what? Dimitri Smith is a corpse. I look at this team and I think it speaks more to the trash of the East than the quality of the Knicks. I don't understand why this team is good at all. I guess as a whole, they have like reasonable defenders at every spot. Okay, the one thing I wanted to touch on is Ira Dean is kind of putting together an ageless wonder season. But Ira Dean is one player and like does not score the ball efficiently. So like the Knicks offense is straight bad and then the defense is okay. That's how I would describe the Knicks. For a 4 seed that won 60 games, I guess they only won 58. I hate them. They had a plus minus of 11, which is like usually reserved for people contending for a championship. Just the weirdness of the league this season. So then there's the Hawks. And the Hawks have kind of been like the perennial round 2 guys. The team is kind of the same. They lost Maximo, but they still have Granny, Marty Taylor, Keegan Murray, Jason Jackson. The big thing for the Hawks, because they've kind of regressed, they've been more of like a 10-15 plus-minus team, and the East got worse, so I would expect their plus-minus to get better. It looks like one big thing, I didn't watch the minus TC results with a super fine eye, but it appears almost certain that Jason Jackson minus TC. I mean, he just regressed in every category significantly this season, and that really sucks because Jason Jackson, if there was going to ever be a guy for this team, it was going to be him. And he was just bad this season. I mean, he went from 61% true shooting to 52% true shooting. The scoring's down. The rebounding stayed the same. The assist to turnovers got worse. He's getting less stocks. Yeah. So there's going to be Granny. Granny will produce. Granny is honestly, in the East, he's one of the best players. I mean, probably the single best player in the East outside of the Nets and Pacers, Sandberg, and fucking Olin. So, like, yeah, the only thing the Hawks have that I like is Traxler and De Los Santos. I think if you run them as like a power forward center combo, probably Granny at power forward and Traxler as your giant anchor at center, things could work out. The biggest problem for this team is, I mean, Jason Jackson, Jamel Abraham are the only two even like existent guards on this team. I mean, the bench is so bad. Like, this is one of those cases where I'm almost certain the Hawks are like borderline ghost ship mode, because like I guarantee you I could find the Hawks a better bench point guard / shooting guard to play for this series on the free agent wire. And that's what they need, because like, look, as it stands right now, Jason Jackson, Jamel Abraham, they're fine and all, but like you're going to need more than that. And it would just be great to get one player that could pass. Like, they should have traded for a point guard that could pass and could help their offense a lot. I hate both these teams. I think I hate the Knicks more than I hate the Hawks. Granny is the best player in this series. The only way the Knicks can win this is if Renee Snyder gets hot from three, which when they did the amazing upset of, who the fuck did they upset last season? Did the Knicks upset Jack? No. They upset somebody. I'm not gonna remember who the hell it was. Oh no, they upset Alex? Whatever. Whoever the Knicks upset last season, they did it because Renee Snyder got hot from three. This season, I don't think that'll happen again. Renee Snyder is taking a big step back. I think Granny will eat on the front court of the Knicks and take this one home. I'm feeling 4-2 Knicks Hawks. Oh, I forgot to do the Nets one because I was just going so fast. So I'll take the Hawks 4. I'll take the Knicks 2. And then the Nets will sweep the Raptors. That is the least controversial take of all time. All right, next up we have the Pacers Magic. This will also be a sweep. The Magic do have Claudio Villanueva, so a little interesting. That's really the only player they have, though, so they're going to be unable to score on offense, and their defense is just not that good. So the Pacers will roll. To talk quickly about the Pacers squad to give them their shine, because I think teams that tried this season deserve it. The Pacers have a great team. I think there are some question marks. Joe Sandberg remains amazing, probably a top 10 player in the league. He just scored, again, at a crazy efficient rate. His volume is beginning to get into that area where it's like, you know, is he still valuable? He generates so many stocks. He helps on the rebounds. Like, he's an amazing player. But as the contract grows and the volume shrinks, you wonder about the clock, right? Like, next season, it definitely could be one of those things where you're like, I don't know if Joe Sandberg is worth it anymore. I love Cantor Bakwa. He's amazing. But the rest of this team is kind of like fatally flawed players that are like still on the upper echelon of quality, like they're top 50 players. But there's a few too many of them to love the team for like a championship. Shane Sullivan, yes, Shane can score at an okay clip, and he does it through threes, which is great because it's hard to defend against. But it's up and down, and he's really shown that he's never going to breach that flat 60% true shooting. He's kind of a high 50s guy now that we've seen the numbers pan out for a few seasons. And then the problem with Shane, he's pretty small and he only gets stocks. He doesn't play man defense. It's not the end of the world. You can work with that. But when I list the next couple players, then it begins to become a trend. Okay, so Richard Pollard, very nice scorer, like big 3-point shooting athlete, doesn't do anything else. So like great to have one fatally flawed guy, but now you have Richard Pollard and Shane Sullivan, and then we'll add Henry Piercy, where it's like, okay, Henry Piercy, another pretty good athletic scorer, but not really the rebounder you want. He only gets defensive rebounds, not the defender you want. He's a terrible man defender. Yes, he gets blocks, but he's a bit foul-y, and he plays zero-man defense. It's like, I know the Pacers are moving on from Piercy, but like, which I agree with, but that's the problem with the Pacers. I feel like they over-invested on offense, and like the problem is, if anything, you want Joe Sandberg to get the ball more. Getting these guys like Shane Sullivan, Richard Pollard, Henry Piercy, all they're doing is taking the ball from Joe Sandberg and then ruining the defensive effect by having them also on the court. This is still a great team. This is unquestionably the second best team in the East. Do they have a chance if the three-point shooting goes well to beat the Nets? Sure. But I worry about their defense. It's just like that defense at the 3-4 spot, which is where Olin is highly likely going to play, scares me. And it's also like, although you could put Joe Sandberg at point guard, you really want Shane Sullivan to be your point guard, and then it'll win when the time comes, could run Olin at point. It's just tough to beat the Nets. So yeah, a little bit about the Pacers. All of that being said, I listed a lot of very good players right there. They will win, maybe 4-1, but I'll give them the 4-0. They deserve it. All right, we got one more good matchup in the East, and it is the Wizards versus the Heat. The Wizards keep cruising with the Timmy Hamilton squad. I mean, the Timmy Hamilton era is over. Timmy Hamilton himself has really hit the end of his life. I mean, he's 35 and he's blue, which is crazy, but his stats suck, like 53% true shooting. The steals are way down from where they have been. He's still getting 2, but he used to be like a 3.5 steals guy. It's just all not great anymore. And a lot of the old school, like original guys on this team have regressed as well. Chuck's starting to get old. He's basically unplayable at this point. He used to be like the key guy I think everybody loved. Julian Suttles, he still has it, but he's right on the fritz. He's scoring the ball way too much, and he's an inefficient scorer. There are a lot of holes on this team. I like Gamez. Gamez is great. The problem with Gamez is the contract, but as far as a player, great, high-quality center that's like below that all-star RBSL level, but like scores the ball super efficiently, plays enough defense even if he's not a great defender. He's an okay boards guy, but again, like not every player has to be some RBSL monster. And then, the rest of this bench is actually guys I don't hate. Love Harlan Davis as kind of like a utility small forward. Love Toilet Atlas as like a bench, given that he only costs $3.5 million a year as a bench defensive big. Arlie Carey continues to be a pretty high quality, albeit overpaid backup guard, scores some points. I think he's playing as the starting guard, but he's good. In fact, Arlie Carey might be the best player on this team. It's debatable. So there's good and bad with the Wizards, but the problem is that they're going to have to play Timmy Hamilton, probably, and if they do, I just don't see it going well. The Heat, interestingly enough, although they're the 6th seed, kind of finally had the season that I expected after they got Takashi. Bazooka had the Bazooka season that I always imagined he would have when Miami first acquired him. Almost 60% true shooting, almost 20 points a game. Wow, passing the shit out of the ball, getting a bunch of stocks, just doing it all, being a tall defender. So you wonder why the Heat didn't look better. I mean, Takashi, career year. Arthas also had a career year. And there's still very high-quality players in American and Reznikov, like, starting on this team. And I don't hate Johnny Beal and D'Angelo Wilson to round out, like, 6 good players. The problem is, after these 6 good players, it gets really bad really fast. There are some questionable coaching decisions that the Heat have made. Like, why is Eberhard Lindell getting any playtime at all? Yes, I realize he can pass the ball, but when the only thing you can do is pass the ball and you're an unathletic midget who can't score and also plays no defense, like, you shouldn't be getting any minutes. I feel similarly about, like, Roger Bechtel, different type of player, but why the hell is he getting minutes? All he's going to do is foul the other team, and he doesn't even score efficiently anymore. So I like this Alex squad a lot, actually. In terms of the matchup, the Wiz versus the Heat, who I think should win, okay, Brian has problems because Brian has, like, slots that he simply cannot fill unless he plays some shitty player, right? Like, for example, at the shooting guard spot, someone terrible has to play for the Wizards. Whether it's Christopher Carmichael, Timmy Hamilton, or Chuck, they're all bad, and one of them has to play. They're downright bad. At the small forward position, you're probably getting Harlan Davis, and then whoever the backup is, bad. Yes, I actually think the Wizards' front court is, like, solid, but those 2 positions, you have to start someone awful. The Heat have 6 guys that are quality players, and if you just stick to those 6, I think you actually straight up have a better team than the Wizards. So if I'm the Heat, I think the Heat should win. It'll be a good series. And the way I would do it if I was Alex, I'm going pretty close to the 48 minutes for 5 players approach and just run it until the wheels fall off, right? I know Takashi is known to get injured, but, like, look, this is the playoffs, and you got to like when you have a way to win as a 3 seed, or excuse me, as a 6 seed, you got to take the way to win as a 6 seed. I would probably only be playing Takashi, Beal, Reznikov, Menethil, American, and Wilson, and I might give Diomedes Chakonis like 10 guard minutes, so you just don't have to run 48 minutes on Tezuka because that's scary. But that's it. I mean, I'm not giving any of these trash bench people. Get Tommy White, get Roger Bechtel, get Eberhard Lindell the fuck out of my lineup. Run your good players, run them for high minutes. Profit. Honestly, that Heat team that I listed giving them high minutes is probably pretty clearly the third best team in the East, in my opinion. So, yeah, win a series and get a chance against the Pacers and see what happens. I'm going to give this one a 4-2 for the Heat. This one has a lot of variance because what I just said is a far cry from the lineup the Heat have been running. So if the Heat run their shit lineup, this could easily be a 4-3 for the Wiz. But in terms of like, if I see these two teams played optimally, I like the Heat a lot. Takashi in particular could have a huge series, just like Arlie Carey is not the guy. And then like Timmy Hamilton on him, that's a win matchup because Timmy Hamilton's going to chuck his team out of the game and there's no way he's scoring efficiently against Bazooka. So I like the matchup. All right, off to the West. The problem with the West is we have better teams overall, but the matchups are worse for round one. So first we have the Supersonics versus the Suns. This will be an annihilation. We'll just give the Suns kind of weirdly did worse than I expected on the season when you look at their roster. The Suns have some players where you're like, should this team be better? Guys like Emmett Joyce, Carlitos Felipe, Hironobu Sakaguchi, like these guys, they were good. They should be good. I think what happened is Carlitos Felipe minus T seed in my estimation. So he's kind of regressed from like, oh, he might be the star player. Now he's just like a player. He's a good quality point guard. The problem is he's demanding a max, and it's like he's almost in shoot your team out of the game territory. He's just efficient enough. He's certainly not a star player. Sakaguchi, obviously the foul problems, and then Emmett Joyce is just like, is he a chucker? The Suns like ended up negative, I think, margin on the season, so it's a little crazy to me. But yeah, there's like the Suns era where they had all these young, really exciting upstart players is kind of dying right now. Some guys just straight up were bad picks, like Luke Skywalker. Obviously, we talked about Felipe, just like the TC roller coaster. I don't know. The Suns have okay players at various positions, but they just have a brutal matchup against the Sonics. The Sonics are probably the premier team, like built like a team. Although the Jazz are nuts, although I think the Jazz are more top heavy. I mean, the Sonics is just like, they're continuing to be one of the greatest three-point shooting teams of all time. I think this team was better than last season from the three ball at least. And it's just like, you just go down the Sonics, and every single player who gets any meaningful minutes on the Sonics, except for Jared McWhorter, is scoring at like 60% true shooting. It's just disgusting. And a lot of quality defenders, good size. Like, the Sonics are, for a team that probably has 0 top 10, maybe even 0 top 15 players. I don't know. Seth Charles, probably like the quote unquote classic top 10, 15 guy you would put in the rankings. Like, Michael Lewis is obviously amazing, but more because of what could be less this immediate season where he was amazing. I mean, like 64% true shooting, maybe the best 3-point shooter in the league. And like injuries kind of derailed the end of his season. Stats probably should have been higher. Yeah, the Sonics just have great people at every position, and the bench is just like, basically the Sonics team that won the championship 2 seasons ago is now the bench for the Sonics, and all these young guys, Seth Charles, Michael Lewis, Alexander Sirski, like have all come up as the new main stars. Jason Treble even was like, I forget if he was a bench guy or a starter for the championship. It doesn't matter. Sonics are a sick team. It'll be really interesting to talk about the Sonics versus the Nuggets. That's going to be a banger of a matchup. But I expect the Sonics to cruise pretty easily here. The Suns might sneak one. I think the Suns have like, there'll be like the Emmett Joyce game, and it could go well. The tough part is like, Emmett Joyce is just going to get matched up against, and same with Felipe, like McWhorter and Sirski and Lewis, who are just like these AA 6'5" defenders. McWhorter is only a steals guy, but like they're just 6'5" athletes. It's just a tough matchup. So Sonics cruise. Nuggets Clippers. So the Nuggets are the new addition. Obviously, when the season started, everybody knew about the Jazz, the Sonics, the Pacers, and the Nets. The Nuggets decided to go all in. And I don't love the way it panned out for him. Uh, I respect the commitment. Like Lester McQuaid is a beast, and we'll talk more about the Lester McQuaid specific matchups because I think we have some interesting data in games against other good centers. But when you just look at the stat lines, like he's probably expected because he's only 26 and we don't know if he's filled out yet to be of this current era, the second best center behind Rycourt. Maybe there's a couple other guys where we kind of will wait and see, like, is Seth Charles any good? Seth Charles is kind of similar to McQuaid, different type of players, but McQuaid's amazing. I like him as the second best center. The rest of this team that Evan sold out to get, I don't know if I love it. Ariagato and Skeeter Jones, like, they're right on the edge, man. It's just like, I like Skeeter Jones. Okay, so maybe I was being a little harsh on Skeeter. Like, he's a 60% true shooting, plays defense, guard, doesn't give you much of anything else, but like, that's pretty good. Ariagato really always scares me. I don't like the fact that he, whatever, that Aria lacks defense. And the scoring always scares me. It's just like anytime you have a guard that like relies a lot on going inside, it's just scary because like as you can see from Aria's inside percentages, which are all in the mid 60s, the mid 60s is a place where good paint defense usually just cooks that. Usually you want, if you can find someone who's above 70%, then you're in like the, okay, I'm just like immune to the matchup, but I don't think Arya is. So those holes won't matter until the Nuggets play someone important, which they're not doing this series. They're going to absolutely slap the Clippers. But when they come against the Sonics, those small things will become factors. To talk super briefly about the Clippers, look, the Clippers are going to lose. They might win a game. The Clippers are not the worst team in the world. They're positive in the West, which is the better conference. But like outside of their front court, the Mike Mortar, Estes, Veloso little trio, I hate this team. I just don't know what Doc's doing. Doc, if you're going to listen to this, like, I know you want to keep Mike Mortar, like, and I understand Mike Mortar is a good player. Look at your situation of your assets. Like, I know you already sold out to get fucking my guy, Sierski, but, like, you just have nothing. You have no chance at a chip. Everybody's too old to pop. I don't get it. It's tough. If I was Doc, I would be selling Veloso and Mortar and Victor, Sandeep, and just, like, doing a reset or at least a full churn cycle where I move everybody for a new team. I don't really agree with Doc's approach. This current team just gonna get destroyed. I think, like, can these guys, if we take this matchup seriously for a minute, I think Ariagato is probably the biggest immediate problem for this team. Although Victor Sandeep is an amazing athlete, and a quality defender. He's only 6 feet tall, but Ariagato 6'8". Stanford Croy 5'9". Ariagato 6'8". So it's just like I see Gato going pretty well against this team. And then Seth Lee and Jalen Williams and Ezra Payne and your whole slot of shooting guards, you just got no one who can defend Skeeter Jones. So I worry more about the guards. This will be an interesting litmus test for Lester McQuaid. Can Lester just dunk on people who aren't good enough? Like, or are Mike Mortar and Veloso and Estes good enough to prevent McQuaid from dunking on them or not? It'll be interesting to see. So I think the Nuggets roll. The Clippers will probably take a game here. This is like a quote-unquote real matchup where, like, if all the stars aligned and the RNG went just right, this could get interesting. But the Clippers are still going to lose. Next, we have the Rockets versus Thunder. This is similar to the Clippers-Nuggets, where the Rockets are significantly better than the Thunder. The Rockets are kind of holding on to a trio of young guys, I think, praying they pop. That trio being Richard Johnson, Shaedon Sharpe, Chase Martinez, and then maybe a slight shout-out to Denver Bradford, although he's a little... It's just unclear what's up with Denver Bradford because he's so early in his development and everything. Look, Shaedon Sharpe and Richard Johnson are two of these guys where they're like, man, you look at the attributes and you look at them and you're like, maybe they could be good, but they're just not quite there. Like Shaedon Sharpe, considering he really doesn't do much except score, he's not quite scoring well enough. And then Richard Johnson, it's like you look at the second half of his rating sheet, all of his rebounding and defense, and you're like, fuck, that looks good. And then you see his scoring line and you're just like, Jesus Christ, what a catastrophe. So they're interesting players. There's some solid like pieces of guys that are filling out this team. You know, Wes Eastwood and Nolan Price. Like these are the type of bargain bin bench guys that I wish GMs were paying. Like GMs who are in the ghost ship realm, like they need to be adding dudes like this to round out their benches to be better. Bryant's putting in the time. Victor Bart's like the main guy, and I don't love Victor Bart, but like he gets blocks, and I know Brian is always just looking to stat pad some motherfucker to sell him for picks. So I respect the shameless hustle, although I don't think he's a good player. On the whole, the Rockets are pretty harmless. This is what happens if you have a mid roster and you take the effort to fill it out well with like quality backup players and stuff. Getting Brooks Horner, who can still score points well. Like Brooks Horner, the deal is amazing. Obviously, it's fruitless because I think Brooks Horner is like not good. There's no future. He won't win a chip. But Brian is like attempting to maximize the team he has today, unlike a lot of GMs. So like, again, I still respect the hustle. So yeah, that's how I feel about the Rockets. The Thunder, they're tearing it all down. The era of the being the most exciting set of prospects is dead. McTallick's gone. I don't know if Morris is gone yet. I'm pretty sure Jalen Duren's leaving after the season. It's unfortunate that it died because a season ago I was probably the most hype on the Thunder as like the team that would come out and contend. They definitely, while the Nuggets who did arise went with the approach of like the Nuggets, to be fair, got a plus TC to McQuaid, so it's like that's the number one thing anybody wants to jumpstart it, while the Thunder had everybody die. But the Nuggets also just had one player they invested in and then bought everybody else, while the Thunder went full, prayed to the TC gods, and Bog did not approve. So yeah, everybody's leaving, all the interesting players. I don't know if Milan Garrett's going. He's kind of the last of the remaining prospects I didn't mention. In terms of this team immediately for this matchup, I think the biggest problem is that the Thunder are just not specifically super good in any single area. Every player is kind of only middle of the line. Will there be anybody to guard Shaedon Sharpe and stop him from going off? I don't really know. I don't think Jaden Ivey or Morris is the guy. I don't think Jonathan Thompson is necessarily the guy. There's a bunch of guys who like might do it. Really, I feel like you want to get Morris or Jonathan Thompson on Shaedon Sharpe, but they just it's like this whole matchup is irrelevant. Both these teams aren't great, so the lower quality means someone like Shaedon Sharpe is actually probably the best player in this series. And the thing is, Shaden's a big volume scorer, so if you don't have a good defender on him, like he could take advantage of that matchup. And there's literally not a single perimeter defense guy on this entire team. If the Thunder want to get really wild with it, the best defender on this team might be Glob Ford, and so you could move Glob Ford into the point guard or shooting guard slot to play the defense. But it's tough. The Thunder have a lot of choices. They have a lot of players who are playable in a lot of positions, right? Like, for example, you have Morris. You could play point guard, shooting guard, or small forward. Jonathan Thompson, similar thing. I might even make that same argument about John Thompson. Lots of guys that can play lots of positions. Jaden Ivey, he can play the guard slots. The front court of the Thunder is pretty set, and I think is better than the Rockets. But I just think the Thunder's guard rotation is just a bunch of pretty bad players that like lots of B's here and there that I worry about a lot. And the real path to success would be to force feed the ball to Angel Moore and Jalen Duren and Milan Garrett. But to do that, you need to not put in a guard who's going to chuck the ball. And the issue is the Thunder don't really have that. They need low usage guards. So by that logic, putting in Glob Ford at point guard, shooting guard, not a bad choice. He doesn't like to shoot the ball. He plays good defense. You still have like 2 more guard slots you need to fill with low usage guys, which is going to be tough. But I think that should be the overall approach that the Thunder take to try and beat the Rockets. I still don't think it will work. I just think that Shaedon Sharpe is going to kind of cruise, and really there's just not much more to talk about. I think he's probably the single best player in all of this. And then in terms of more what I'm interested to see is, can Victor Bart play defense against these kind of mid-level centers? This will be the litmus test to see if Victor Bart should be bought by a team that cares about winning, because If Victor Bart can stop these types of centers, then it's like, all right, maybe he's worth keeping. And if he can't, then he's definitely not worth keeping. I'm going to take the Rockets 4-2 over the Thunder because they have home court. But this is a real matchup. And with all the players that Jack has, he has a lot of opportunities to do something crazy. Jack, the crazy thing you should do is put Glob Ford in. All right, we have the Jazz versus the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies, ghost ship, not a lot going on, not a lot to talk about. I don't even know how much of this team is going to be on this team next season. I think they have Chris Leak and McTalk, and that's kind of like the future outlook for them. The Jazz are amazing. My favorite team in the league. Rycourt is just, it's unfortunate. Look, this isn't Palm's fault. I'm just sad that the league got ruined with Rycourt because I think if Rycourt doesn't have the crazy plus TCs, then we're probably looking at the Jazz v Sonics as like an extremely sick matchup, and also like we're all kind of on par with the Nets. But with Bastian Rycourt, if he has any more growth, it's really a problem. But with him being a 30 points per game scorer on 70% true shooting, the only question is whether he can be stopped by the elite defenders of the elite big man defenders, and I just don't know if he can. The rest of this team is very good. Randy Brown, amazing. Chance Roman, he still has gas in the tank. I think that will end, and we may see the Jazz take a slight step down. And then Frederick Jones, great point guard. This is just a great team. They're going to cruise. We'll talk more about the Jazz when they face people in the real world, but I've been talking for a long-ass time, and football is starting. So I'm going to cut it a little short, but these are my picks for the first round. After this round, we get our first real matchup. We're going to get the Nuggets versus the Sonics. That's something to watch. This first round, unless you're a degenerate looking for upsets, maybe not the most exciting thing in the world. But the Nuggets versus Sonics will be great, and then there will be more great conference finals and finals matchups. So this is the playoffs where normally I say round one is the best. I won't lie, round one is not the best. You're going to care about the end of these playoffs. But these are my picks. I hope you enjoy, and toodles.